Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to the Digital World Town Hall weekly meeting and council that we usually have, where we are joined by our live audience, as well as, folks from all over the world, so to speak. And then we'll actually go through some specific things for the digital world. We'll talk about the things that we've accomplished this last week, priorities, topics, agenda items, and then we will just do Q&A. There's a lot going on in society. There's not a ton to report this week, which usually there is, but there's not this week, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But we'll go through that. Grateful for the co-hosts, Wally, for always being here and being stable and solid. Last week for Terrence as well. As a reminder, this is a private membership association. Some of the things we talk about may be forward-looking. And as a reminder, the things that we're focused on solving is really just secret combinations that do things that are inappropriate. And we believe that transparency is a really good disinfectant for that. And the name of the game is, so to speak, around transparency is decentralized systems. I think that we can all relate over the last couple of weeks on how we've been able to see transparency, or at least what we're starting to see with auditing systems, reviewing systems, and finding discrepancies that are global and starting, the certain systems within the US. But we'll talk a little bit more about that, but just so that we've got a good context, the digital world is really here to help find that balance between the centralized systems and the decentralized systems for the long term, so that humanity actually has a choice and it can actually exercise its agent. As individuals, we have agency so that we can actually exercise that. It's based upon derived keys from a private master key. So usually those are called 12 words. In this case, the screenshot's 24. And then those derived keys basically go to manage different things in our lives. As individuals, we do lots of different things. We don't even realize it, but the goal is to help intelligently organize the different things that we do. Maybe it's going and getting a driver's license. Maybe it is getting a job. Maybe it's taking a vehicle that we want to sell to someone. Maybe we want to rent it out. Maybe it's got something to do with getting a license. Maybe we want to fly a drone, and we've actually gone through certain things and we can fly in different jurisdictions or areas. And then it's understanding in the digital world how jurisdictions are really global and connecting that together for humanity, really bridging the digital and physical worlds through decentralization and sustainability. This is a real key part of what we're doing in focus. Some of the things that we've focused on this last week is really around ledger, exchange, as well as treasury. So when we talk about putting offers up for one asset for another, and then being able to have those things be run, whether it's with an internal exchange within the digital world, or whether it's within an external exchange, there's a lot of nuances to doing that. This last week has really been a lot of work on the legal side of things, a new key agreement that we've brought on board with a key partner, Candao, and then really implementing what we call floats or digital floats. Some people look at it as kind of like a private offering, but in the way that the world can actually get involved, it's not like an initial coin offering, but it has some of the same elements where you've got a digital business, a digital asset, and then people that basically get on board with it. So there's a lot that goes into that, but we've been building out the systems for that. And it's also not just the digital world, but jurisdictions within the digital world. So some things like this, you'll notice there's a new moderator account that can basically help with some of the treasury responsibilities. So there's treasury, exchange, and then some elements around offers and basically how things are submitted. So this is actually working with multiple different processes. These are not live yet. And then also how that ties into some of the things that are going on in society in the digital ecosystems, if you will. So this is actually a system for the trademark that's also been completed. There's elements there. And then the decentralized autonomous organizations, also known as DAOs and D corporations or digital corporations, tying that into digital assets that basically bridge the future. So there's some things that we've been working on as it relates to that called the digital fund. And the digital world digital fund white paper, if you will. We've been building out ecosystems that kind of tie to that are particularly around how we create what's called a suffocation strategy that actually, and I want to kind of go down a little further here. Let me go all the way down here so we can get that going. So how we actually work with the digital corporations tied to digital assets that actually drive revenue for the digital world, so it can be self-sustaining. Imagine if someone could create a company and then create an asset and then create a governance or be a part of a governance process that actually enables worldwide investors to become a part of it through a distribution channel, so to speak. And in this particular environment, whether they're, funding organizations, they usually basically do something around, there's an investor, there is a capitalization table, there's some form of either shareholder or shareholder agreement or stock or membership. And so depending if it's an LLC, like a membership, or some form of stock, it'll be a C Corp or a D Corp of sorts, but how there can actually be channel partners based upon these standards. So those things that we just mentioned, these channel partners have investors that want to actually have deal flow that are following these same types of structures. And why is that important? Why is it valuable? It ties to the ability for, let's see if I can show you here, actually here. So imagine the ability to have multiple different financing entities or floats or offerings that have basically different terms, but they're similarly in how they're raising funds, they're a company, they have an asset, but then they tie into other ecosystems around where is the business, how is it governed, what is the asset? So for instance, where is the asset created? Where are the actual assets? And here's the big difference between the way it's currently done with lots of different funding organizations. You can actually see if the asset has been moved. And with a process like this, where you have a private identity that's tied to a public individual, but in a private way. So let's say that the organization that actually pulls in investments knows who the investors are, but the rest of the world doesn't need to know it. But there can actually be things. So if you look at this top one, here you have like patents and trademarks and rewards and bonuses. But what if you could actually get rewards or bonuses based upon being loyal to that actual project and being involved in it longer? Therefore, you haven't moved tokens or assets from one location to another. And then it enables the ability to have rewards or bonus issues. That is a very different thing. And one of the reasons why I believe this type of technology for the future will actually be adopted by most crowdfunding platforms, whether they're using Jobs Act, which is Reg A, Reg CF, or Reg D, different flavors of them, or not. These will basically be the types of structures. And then imagine in a digital world where the actual dispute resolution process, if something goes sideways, is very streamlined. It's very transparent. And then it can create a precedence for even a local or physical jurisdiction to actually enforce law. The digital world does not have force of law. It doesn't have a military. It doesn't have police. But it's easy to have a foreign entity or a foreign registered entity from a digital world corporation or a D Corp that can actually tie to that. So those are the directions we're going down. None of it is done. None of it's baked. There's just a lot of details in how it can actually be framed up, whether it's with a framework. So the framework that the digital world adopts is the digital or the Jobs Act that was actually, a guy came up this morning, was actually, his name is David Wield, wonderful gentleman, but he's the one that helped create that and has done a lot within the same category. So there's nothing to vote on, nothing to really review as far as that goes. A lot of this is just structure and really a plan to go to market for these types of things that then create, I can't say create funds because they don't create funds, but they enable funds, they enable issuance. And one of the big core parts of this last week has also been working on not just the exchange, but what we call the treasury. And so how the treasury works, how liquidity works, how market making works, and all the details that are kind of therein. So with that being said, you can see some of the interfaces. Again, this particular one is inside the digital world within the Hawaiian Kingdom. And this is for an exchange moderator around currencies. And they'll actually be dynamic based upon your typical way of creating a digital asset. And then this is based upon equities. So you have equities, currencies, and commodities that all tie to it. So those are basically the core things. We have been working on some elements with a partner we believe that has strong capabilities within the digital world on the social side of things, and working through some of the technology there. This is an early sneak peek, just because that's how we are. We're transparent about what it is that we're building, what we're doing. And so this is how things can be sent and received. The big part around right now, the ability to actually take a contact and hash that contact and create a derived key from that hash, and then create a relationship for so for instance, you can actually have contacts that are aware of one another and know one another, but they don't even need to know phone numbers, and no one needs to know that they're actually connected, because it's actually a private connection and private transactions and or private communication. So those are some of the things that we're actively working on behind the scenes, is some new private communication systems that uses contacts that tie to that. And then the exchanging process within, this is not a web interface, this is a mobile interface. Some of the things that we're toying with this relationship here is around how homes, vehicles, because we can already do both the homes and the vehicles. They're already a part of the asset system, but we're trying to tie it into some of the mobile systems based upon a partner request. So we'll see if that works. And then, how other things work in life. So there's other things that are digital assets that we really have, whether it's our relationships, whether it's a vehicle, whether it's a home, whether it's a service, and really how all that stuff can come together. So these are all areas that we're working within. For those of you that have already seen the vehicle stuff, you plug in a license plate or a VIN, it automatically pulls it up. And then you can basically say, hey, I want to offer this as a ride share, or maybe a delivery service, or maybe I'm running a business. Maybe I want insurance that's tied to this. So it's a beautiful thing, but those are all elements of what we've been focused on and working within. And then just working with a lot of the different current Clear funds, and then maturing that as it relates to standing up new partnerships and relationships within the Clear fund. So with that being said, I know usually it's another 10 minutes of report out. We're super quick today, primarily just because a lot of the things we're doing are behind the scenes. So with that being said, oh, hi. It's nice to see you, Adam. Welcome, buddy. So with that being said, thoughts, comments, feedback, kia oras? Anybody? If not, we'll wrap up early. I'm sure there's lots of other things to do. Thoughts, feedbacks, comments, one last time. There's a lot going on out there in the market. Victoria, go for it. Just unmute. There you go.
I was just wondering, and this is something that came across my mind, was for the dispute process, when you're engaging in a dispute process, what would that look like?
It would look like this. So basically, someone logs in, they scan it, they log in, they have three options. And you're either going to create a dispute, you're going to create a class action suit. These are some of the class action suits. So there's public ones, and then there's private ones, and then there's technology, kind of like how we're coming together here within this technology. It's actually run on similar technology as to what I'm showing you here. So you basically have an ecosystem where a moderator comes in, or an arbitrator, and then one party picks another. They basically share in the costs, and it can be short term, it can be long term, but that's basically what it looks like to actually log in. Here, I'll go ahead and I'll log in and actually show you. So I'm using a Life app, Digital Life, Clear Life, Samoa Life, Vanuatu Life, Hawaiian Life, they'll all work. So you log in, and then you basically have this dispute side of it. Let's see, disputes. So you have 3 different types of disputes, and you basically go through and you start one. And then what's nice is in the future, this is one of the big original use cases for AI. One party says, this is my claim. The other party, even before the other party sees it, AI can ask them, based upon how it was filled out, did this and this and this occur? Or have you done this? Or have you thought of it this way? So it basically goes through a process, kind of like how, you have usually a defense attorney and the opposite for the plaintiff that basically goes through and brings a case. And so this helps that from a process of automation. So, and then there's jurisdictions within the digital world, like the Hawaiian Kingdom, or the Hopis, or Vanuatu, or Tuvalu, and some of the other ones that would use this in such a way where they don't need to build up their own courts and ecosystem. This can kind of use the same technology and process through it. So I hope that answers your question and makes sense.
It does. I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So when it comes to having other people, like we're joined to, they don't necessarily know our phone number, our email address, but we're connected. And as it relates to the dispute process for victims of, we'll say, domestic violence or something like that, who wish to remain anonymous in one of these cases, how would you go about securing that?
So there's 2 things that's important to know. One is this is more for civil type things. So when I come back to this digital world, click on services, go to dispute resolution. This is really disputes that are civil, not criminal. So if someone's physical life or property is in jeopardy, that's where you go to force of law that's local to you. But there's a lot of things that are really, the jurisdiction may be in question. It may be a global transaction. It may be a civil type thing. And that's where this really makes sense. And as far as the privacy side of it, if both parties are not comfortable with being public on it, like these, then you actually have a private, they end up being private. So they're not public, it's not aired, it's a private type of dispute. And again, there's jurisdictions within the digital world. When we look at the Pacific Union, you can see a majority of them. So these are a good group of the ones that are already there. There's 3 or 4 that are actually not on this list. And so you can actually see some of their environments here. But does that answer your question as far as privacy as well as any kind of potential physical issues?
It does. It does. Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments, feedback, criticism, positivity, negativity?
Positivity, here we go. Everything that's happening in the US and actually around the world, your systems could resolve everything, Michael, for hardly any money, no time, transparency, efficiency. It's mind-boggling. It's just, I just can't wait to see your systems go live. I can't wait for that day. I'm watching, all the manpower, the man hours, the expense of Doge and everything that they're doing. And they wouldn't have even had to do that had your systems already been implemented. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It's
like, I want to, what?
What's really neat about that is I actually believe what Doge is doing is laying the groundwork to deploy these types of digital systems. And whether it's the digital world, which I don't think they're paying attention to what we're doing, so I don't even think that they would realize it. But the nice thing is whatever they end up implementing, the digital world, I believe we have an 80+% chance that it'll automatically snap into that framework. And when that happens, There's a financial system, an asset management system, a land management system, an identity management system, which is really the most important, the identity management system, that creates a parallel path that is a decentralized system for what will be implemented. And you're right that a lot of these systems that we're talking about and these different services, they can add value. But I think the biggest part of what this is it can show the world what can actually happen and how systems of the future can actually be rolled out in a way that the individual actually owns their own identity and basic human rights, So you're right. What's happening, not just in America, but globally, it's positive. It's, it's uplifting. I know there's a lot of people that are like upset about access to data or other things like that. And I can understand where they're coming from, but I would argue that most of those people, they've actually already had access to all of our systems, at least most of them. I know we got people from New Zealand, from Australia, from Mexico, from Canada, all over the world, just even on this simple call. But everyone is really affected by a lot of these things that the US has. I personally believe if there's one thing that can be done in the next 4 years, that's bringing the fiscal and financial discipline to systems that are run amok. And if you really think about that, this is 30 plus years worth of systems and a lot of administrations and a lot of complacency and a lot of just theft that has gone on. But, in the end, as the future goes on, you don't have to pay the systems and the people and the processes the same way. You can choose to say, hey, it's just like, remember when we used to get paid with cash, and then we used to use checks, and then we used to use credit cards, and now credit cards will eventually be used to use, and direct deposits will eventually be used to use, because how all these systems will actually implement, they'll implement a cryptographic process. And some people are like, what is that? Really, all cryptographic, or cryptography, all it is math. It's just math.
Yeah.
But it's intelligently organized math. And if it's organized too much and centrally controlled, it actually creates a vehicle for slavery for humanity versus the freedom that we could and should all be a part of. So wonderful observation.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well, and you know what, with your systems, because your systems could be implemented in every sector of life, I think, anyway. And what I see is how it could free us up to just go out and create and be in unity and work together. Because that whole aspect I just can't believe the amount of time and money and arguing that is just, it's just a waste.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a waste. It's so inefficient. I don't know. I beyond what it could do financially, I just see how we would all be, it almost would be like a huge weight is lifted from us, and that we can really go out and do what we really want to do, and just create and have fun and be efficient.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wonderful observation. This is a good example. So if we come into services and we just look at tax, because a lot of us don't talk about tax, but really when you make money, you're taxed. When you buy something, you're taxed. When you die, you're taxed. When you sell something, you're taxed. All of those things, when you really add up how much a dollar that you make is taxed, it makes it difficult. And I'm not saying difficult to have appreciation for basic systems that we get to be involved with, but difficult from a drive. And I'm not saying we should even be driven around monetary value at all. But the hard part is when other systems actually control those and tax you. And I think tax is going to be a beautiful conversation over the next couple of years. But imagine a wallet that has all of the information around who you are, your reputation, your assets, the values, but people don't know who it is. But it can actually tie to centralized and decentralized systems, because they're already doing it with centralized systems. And then they can actually fill out forms that are all basically done for you. So even if you have to fill out and process forms, I see a future where you don't need to fill out reports, you don't need to fill out returns, you don't need to do any of that type of documentation. For instance, in this particular case, filing. In the US, you're supposed to file this form 8949, but what if this was actually done with a derived key instead of a social security number and a name? Or maybe it was a social security number and a derived key, and that was actually acceptable. So imagine an environment where everything that we do is actually transparent and all of the facets of our life, it can actually be automated, but in such a way where our reputation really matters. And so it starts driving to a point where, it's not what's happening in China and other parts of the world with social credit stores, because you're private. They don't know who you are, but you can validate and verify and authorize who you are. And even if you do, it doesn't stick in their records, so to speak. So you're spot on. I mean, these are all the different facets of life, health and law. And what's really crazy is starting to see what they're doing with some of the health stuff that's tying to these centralized systems. I mean, in many ways, it's very disturbing and concerning with, I think it's this guy right here. So this, announced strategic project that's coming about, but there's futures that's actually going to solve a lot of it. So super excited with that. A lot of it is just taking this infrastructure and then writing reports and building systems on top of it too. So what creates a lot of opportunities, and that's also why these different, when we talk about these funds and these different floats and these different businesses that are real businesses with real cash flow, with real products, with real assets, with real dividends and rewards and bonuses, I really believe that that's the future, and why others that already have history in being a part of the future, whether those are investors, whether those are developers, whether they're, consumers. Consumers are actually one of the biggest parts of it. But yeah, with that being said, next question, thought, comment? You guys are shy tonight, but thank you, Danielle, for your feedback, and I agree with you. Should we wrap up early, or you got something you want to say? Victoria, it sure is nice to have you join us. Adam, it's wonderful to spend time with you almost every day since our last time. And I look forward to building with you in a big way. John, same
Actually,
thing.
Michael, I have a question now that Adam's on the phone. I didn't see him here on the call.
Go ahead.
Do you think from a Treasury perspective that the ACH will slowly decline? The automatic clearinghouse, which is the automatic clearinghouse for payments.
Oh, I know what it is, and Adam knows what that is too. But Adam, thoughts? You're on mute still, bud.
Automatic.
There you go. There we go. It's hard. It's hard.
I'm yeah, all right. They're going to have to change radically. I'll take my video off. That'll be better. Yeah. How's that? Is that better?
Much better. Go for it.
That's better.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could say SWIFT, automatic clearinghouses, all of those kind of delivery systems. They're going to have to pivot and change radically, and they are changing. They've seen the writing on the wall a while back, so they're just going to, I guess you could say, morph. That'll be the ultimate answer, I think.
Okay, Michael, what about the international automatic clearinghouse as well? Like, for example, I know you said that you were doing stuff with Europe. They have the SAPE payment channel. do you think that would be something that would be in line with the automated clearinghouse as well?
Well, so I think wires and ACH are just a form of payments that ride on top of the SWIFT systems that are currently out there. And some are local banks, some aren't. But there have been talks that we have been discussing. But to be honest with you, digging into the details of interbanking and the history behind it, I shouldn't go into at this stage. But just know that there is a very different strategy than what Ripple's doing, where it's cross-border payments and transactions and such. And even though we've got, the same technology as Ripple, but I would say times 5, maybe 6 or more. And it's not just around the payments or cross-border payments, it's really around how it actually plugs in for humanity. Stellar does some very good use cases in addition to what Ripple's doing. But the digital world is really at a different construct in the approach. But it does interface and connect with both the Ripple and Stellar environments. And I personally believe that, long-term, there will be definite viability and integration into those systems and adoption. I really believe that there will be mainstream adoption of all the systems that I've just mentioned. And yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry I didn't answer
Thank
your
you.
question. There will be a time where we will. So, but it's just we're really.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, because I've done a lot of traveling, so I've had different types of travel cards, and those travel cards, they can swap multi-currencies, they can do all these types of things that has really kind of challenged, the status quo on what's capable. But I think that there is more of a fine balance that we could probably look at as efficiencies as opposed to, replacing or being extremely dominant in that area, seeking that common goal. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, you're spot on. And what we call an off-ramp, where you can actually push a reward or a payment to a fiat-based account that actually has currency in it that's tied to a credit card, that is actually what we call an off-ramp. And you're right, we've been running those 5-6 years, and the goal is to actually enable multiple different jurisdictions and regions through their own legislation and their own banking and insurance laws and even title laws that can enable credit cards to be issued within their own jurisdiction, that bridge the gap between the current fiat system and rails, whether that's Diners Club or Visa or MasterCard or American Express, that then off-ramp into the existing system, but using the digital infrastructure of the future. So it's kind of a bridge between the two. So it's interesting that you bring that up, but yeah. Any other thoughts?
Michael, if you're
Go ahead.
bridging two, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ed. I'm sorry.
If you're bridging the two, aren't we tied back again to the fiat system?
Only until the vendors move off. The vendors have a lot of benefits of moving off. They don't have the merchant fees. They don't have to wait for the merchants to pay them for days and days. They can issue rewards that are next generation rewards, amazing. These rewards are actually valuable. They can actually be exchanged. They can be tracked, but the user is private. So there's 10 benefits for a vendor or a merchant to move off of the existing Visa, American Express, MasterCard, blah, blah, blah rails. And I believe that will happen in a short period of time. It's just, they have to have the wallets have to be to a point where mainstream adoption and mass adoption can actually occur, where the exchanging systems in them, the liquidity systems in them, the treasury systems. And we're not building that for the whole world. We're building it for the digital world that has the whole world as the jurisdiction. But people have to say, and this is where the rubber meets the road, and we've talked about this before, the user that wants to buy something, the individual, and the merchant. Right now, the experience is that merchant knows who the user is. They know how to market to them. They know what their emails are. They know what their phone numbers are. They know what their names are. And even if they just get a phone number, now they know their name. Even if they just get an email, now they know their phone number. I mean, it's crazy to see how it all works. But in a digital world that we're talking about, people can retain their identity and their privacy, but they can transact and make a payment, and they can even verify that they have the funds even before a payment is made, or they can verify a reputation and identity. And then they can get royalties, or they can get rewards. So they can become loyal customers with a merchant or vendor that gets paid in real time. In my opinion, there should be no fees. So imagine no fees, you get paid in real, so no fees, no delays, no centralized systems, and you've got all the benefits of the rewards programs, which I believe actually will be the future, because they will actually be assets that the individuals can actually start holding, and then there'll be a market where they can be traded. We think that the meme coin market is pretty powerful right now. What happens when you tie that to a company and people actually become the company? The shareholders actually start becoming that company. Their voices, their actions, their votes, their interactions equals the loyalty, equals the direction, equals even, imagine a future where, let's say you fly on Delta, or I'll give an example for those friends down in New Zealand. I didn't know this, but when you actually sign up a power bill, you can actually vote. And the power company is actually like a private membership association at the end of the year. Now you pay for power out the wazoo. It's like 5 times more expensive than anything I'd ever seen in my life. But that's because they're an island. They got to generate all through different ways. So it's really neat how they do it. But at the end of the year, they actually have this type of profit sharing where if the fees have not, or if there's profit, everyone gets a check, and they literally send out checks. In the future, I don't think it'll be a check. I think it'll just be, hey, this is your public wallet, and boom, you're paid. But imagine people that actually continue to go back. For instance, how many of you are you part of a rewards program? Maybe it's Delta, heavens to Murgatroyd, that plane that crashed up in Canada. But maybe it's Marriott. But have you ever paid attention to how your points get accumulated? And the next thing you know, oh, hey, I got enough, I can buy a room, or I can get a flight. Well, when you really start understanding the history behind those, and then, hey, I got 5 friends that want to go on this flight, and this person can move there and move this to there. And next thing you know, you have enough points. Today, it's somewhat difficult. And there actually are exchanges that exchange like Delta for Marriott points or Amex points. And so imagine, and by the way, I'd have to ask you a question, do those rewards get taxed? So when we start putting all this stuff together, we start understanding that there is really an ecosystem around payments, loyalty, identity that can be enabled through these future systems where the individual retains their privacy and rights, but the vendors actually get a ton more benefits and value. So once those two things come together, the vendors and the individuals, because it's all about shopping and it's all about choices, the voting is every single time. Right now, you go and swipe a card, or you go and pay for something. But imagine if it's a scan in the future. Every time you make that scan, or every time, it'll actually be a time where you make a tap. So they'll come to those things as well. But it's really all about adoption for the buyer and the seller, whether you're calling them vendors and users or whatever you want to call them. That's the future.
But continue what you were saying. Continue what you were just saying. Every time you tap or every time you swipe, what happens?
You literally are voting and choosing for which system that you want. And that's the real choice that people are going to be able to get the opportunity to have. Whether we realize it or not, I believe the next 4 years is going to be something like this. The United States of America is going to become that superpower that the world used to look up to it as. It will become a standard again. It will become something that people can trust in. Like when the United States of America lost its gold standard because the gold just wasn't there and they were issuing more dollars than they had. And then a president came in and audited and said, we can't do this. And I believe that there's going to be a massive reset. Let's say that they do use gold and other things as backing for this future, but then you actually have some discipline around how it's done. Now, I think there's the debt and the ratios and the numbers are so far out of whack right now. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of math, but in the end, the system that's actually going to do it is going to be a blockchain-based system. Okay, so if we can agree that, go ahead.
No, go ahead. So if we can agree,
If we can agree that it's going to go from the current fiat system that has no transparency to a blockchain system that has transparency, then the next question is, will that just enslave humanity? Or with a centralized system, or with a decentralized system, will it free humanity? And so we're going from...
That was...
Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to lose this. So somebody was telling me, I was speaking with somebody and they were saying, oh no, they've created their own blockchain. How do I know if that blockchain is centralized or not?
There's a thing called permission and permissionless. And here, I'm going to go to the digital world. I'm going to click on the main site. I'm going to scroll down. There's a comparison all the way down at the bottom. If you expand it, you'll basically see this comparison table. And there's 2 chains that are not in here. Otherwise, it's got most of the chains. I'm going to zoom in on some systems here. So these are some systems here, and they're what's called permissioned blockchains. So this means you have to actually get permission to get a wallet. And for instance, whenever you go onto an account and you sign up as a user with a username and a password, or you do X, Y, and Z, and you're actually in their database, you're getting permission to create an account inside of their system, and they're doing certain things with that. Versus permissionless systems. So a permissionless system is anybody in the world can actually come in and create an account and start transacting without anyone controlling them or even knowing who they are, okay? And then there's non-blockchain based systems, which is the current system that humanity is currently dealing with. This is what we just talked about. Payment providers like Visa, digital banks. These are doing money things. And there's lots of those that I won't even get into. A Venmo is a good example like that, Cash App, etc. And then traditional banks and the likes. And so when you look at all of the different permissioned or permissionless or banking, you basically start seeing all these different things that they do. Now, the digital world, and I'll go ahead and take a real quick screenshot and then point out what specifically we're talking about. So this little thing right here, this digital world, you'll see, now it's important to note, this was actually done by a third-party university, actually out of Australia. And they came in and identified all these different environments that we basically are focused on that's different. For instance, identity management, organizational management, so the ability to start an organization, the ability to create digital assets. These are all such key differentiators. For instance, you can do creation of assets within Ethereum, and then you can even run smart contracts with Ethereum. But can Ethereum create a digital organization that then does asset management? Not today. Can Ethereum do identity management? Are they permissionless? Yes, they are. Can they do it at scale? Some would argue yes, some would argue no. Can they do it at a price point that will be competitive where the future will adopt it? That's where Ethereum right here falls down, okay? But there's a large ecosystem around that. Bitcoin, it does a lot with really being a poster child of how cryptography can actually be a part of the future. The problem is it's too slow and it's not really private. When I say not really private, The digital world creates derived keys for key management. And that's where all of this stuff here with key management comes into play. Key management, key rotation, all of that stuff is so important around the derived keys that it really is a massive differentiator from all other chains. There's not one other chain that I'm aware of that does that. But you took a look at Solana. So Solana can actually do things from a speed standpoint and a price standpoint that's decent. When you start understanding stability and structure and future, there'll be a whole nother conversation around questions. As a matter of fact, if you just look at the transactions over this last week, you start seeing some of the games that are very, very real that are being played there. And I'll go ahead and point out, an example of specifically what I'm talking about with that. So this here is an article that goes through a couple of graphs. So you see, volumes, and some of the key things are around really just number of wallets, number of transactions. So this is from December, and you start seeing volume just falling off. Why? A lot of it is because there's manipulation behind the scenes with certain technologies or certain transactions or wallets. And so when you really start understanding, as well as there were some outages that happened in this environment as well. But when you start looking at things like, in November, there was 8.4 million, as of today, there's 8.4 million, whereas in November, there were 18.5. So that's a 55% drop just within, not even specifically the price, but also the volume. There's telling, and I would say this just comes down to just straight games. So the goal is to have not a lot of volatility, but still have transparency. But at the same time, you basically have prices that are being managed primarily because they're tied to real world assets, similar to some of the things that we're seeing here. Whether it's a data token or a DAO token or a CDM token or a phone token, or things that have real revenues. Like this is $21 billion a year in revenue. This has 700 million in pre-orders, things like that there's massive value and volume that's out there. So that being said, does that answer your question? I know it was
Yeah, that does answer my question. So why is it, there's people that are so much more advanced than I am in technology and all that. And I'm hearing DeFi is like the new buzzword now. Are these platforms really decentralized, or why do these people not know, or do they know? Am I the one? I'm very confused because I'm hearing this all day long. Oh yeah, these people, they're doing DeFi and these ones are doing that. Are they really? How do I know? How do I know that those platforms are decentralized?
Very good question. And this has actually come up a couple times in the last 2 or 3 weeks. DeFi, when you go to these different DeFi events, now remember, it's a marketing coin. When they say DeFi,
Yes.
is supposed to, I think they're alluding to decentralized finance. But the reason I say I think is when I usually dig into most of them, and the way to dig in is you just log into their system. So how you're going to log in? And most of them, for instance, like exchanges, and this is how a lot of the corruption in what people call the crypto world happens, is you log into their systems and your keys are actually in their systems. Now, the private key is in their system. That's not good. And so the answer to your question is, I believe that about 80+% of what people in the crypto and DeFi industry are doing is not decentralized. When I say that, what I mean is, when I logged into this interface, all I did was I said, hey, I want to just log in. And I grabbed an app that I didn't put my name into. I didn't put, specific personal things into, but then I can actually log in and I can actually use 5-factor authentication, no usernames, no passwords, no permission, but then I can come in and I can start doing things that still follows that same process around creating a unique identity. And when I scan this again, this creates another derived key. So you'll notice over here on the left, this is actually new and unique. So this is an example of a decentralized system. This is an example of a system that is a piece of garbage, if you ask me. And there's a whole nother conversation around this. But when you try and log in, like I can have lots of assets behind this, but if I can't get in here or through one of these other third parties, like think about it. You think that Apple is decentralized? No. Google, Passkey, or even these, depending on what wallet they're using, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt with the wallet. But these are centralized systems. You cannot log into a system. And for me personally, I mean, there's actually a lot of things that we're understanding, and on this type of system, we can't even access because these types of things happen. I'll give you an example. This is like a real world, so this is a particular account. Like this is just the biggest joke, and it's been a real actual difficult thing, but so I'm going to come in, I'm going to grab this verification code, which usually has always worked, no issues, no problems. So don't recognize it. There's nothing that's changed on this device at all. So then when you send an email, so it sent it off to this address, it doesn't come into email.
Oh, jeez.
So I'll pull it over here before I'll just search that Coinbase real fast. Search anything Coinbase.
So I'd like to sign up for the Digital World 101 course to learn how to talk to people, how to, have them ask these questions with the systems and the platforms that they're dealing with. Because I'm telling you, people don't know this people don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
They think that they're decentralized. They do. They really think that they're private and secure and decentralized.
Like, watch this. This thing just dies. You're spot on. That's why FTX was such a nightmare, because people trusted that all of their gains were over there. And for instance, it's the same type of thing. Then there's certain on-ramps and off-ramps that people are forced to. But this is a good example of something that is in DeFi. People would say, here, I'll even ask AI. Is Coinbase in the DeFi industry? That's awesome. That's awesome. So they're basically saying that no, or not exactly. Coinbase primarily centralized exchange. So this is a really good example. So it's not a decentralized exchange, but perfect case in point. Here, I'll read this.
In short, Coinbase is not inherently a decentralized platform or part of the DeFi sector, but it supports and bridges interactions with the DeFi ecosystem. It remains primarily a centralized institution.
So that's a great example, of both. So how we logged into a decentralized system here and actually did certain things with cryptographic keys versus over on the other side of it. So good question. Thoughts?
So when do you think your systems will be live so we can start getting out there and
the systems to
onboarding people?
The systems to do the financial system and identity system, they're up today, and they're up and solid and tested. Right now, we're working on the exchange and the treasury for the digital world financial systems. There's already some entities within the actual digital world that have actually started rolling out their own physical and digital currencies that tie to them. And, they're doing their own things, but, pieces of them are already functioning. As far as mainstream adoption goes, I believe that what's happening right now in society is actually a massive, compelling event. And when I say in society, I'm talking primarily in America. America is finally standing up and taking a stand for what will be done and doing the discipline around, calling a spade and, specifically starting to be transparent about what's going on. So it's only going to be a matter of time until, imagine today I would call it tyranny. Robbery and tyranny is what's going on, and slavery, where you basically have people that are working hard and paying taxes where they can't see if those taxes are actually going to the things that they're thinking they're going to, such as schools or roads. But in the future, people can actually pay taxes and literally see their asset go into a fund or an account that then goes and funds other things. So literally, there can be total transparency around every dollar that is spent. And I believe
And as a taxpayer, seems to me as a taxpayer, you would be proud if you could see where that's going and where it's making a difference. I think it would just motivate people and give them a sense of some sort of sense of purpose and all of that.
You're spot on. And I mean, think about it. If you're paying Social Security into a fund only to find out that, 170 million people really are fictitious, and that money is going to people that aren't even alive or don't even live in the country, or just weird stuff. It's difficult for people to pay into that, knowing that it's actually going to be bankrupt unless they can get some fiscal responsibility. But on the flip side, if they can say, hey, because it's really just math. This amount of money came in over this period. This amount of money is in holding. Inflation and time value of money is going up, and cost of living is going up, and these indexes equal this. Well, the math is going to add up. The hard part over the next 10 months plus is going to be the sheer fact of transparency around what's really happening. So, but it'll get,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it'll get worse before it gets better. So, other thoughts or comments or questions? Okay. Well, today's meeting is going to be exactly to the point. So 1 hour to the T, and we will plan on seeing you next week. Again, today was February 18th, 2025, and we will see you in 7 days. Enjoy the snow wherever you are, or the sunshine wherever you are. And thanks for being you, and thanks for being here. So we look forward to seeing you next week. Much love. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.